Tonight, the situation in Venezuela is continuing to deteriorate economically, and there's actually talk that Venezuela will run out of energy. Imagine, Venezuela runs out of energy. Think about that. How is it possible that the country with the largest oil reserves in the world can run out of energy? The answer is complicated. From a political standpoint, this story is easy to tell, right? Over on Fox News or at the White House. Is there a difference? Anyway, you're going to hear that the fault lies solely and completely with President Nicolas Maduro and his merry band of communists, as they would say. But on CNN, the New York Times, or MSNBC, you will hear, oh, wait. On CNN, the New York Times, and MSNBC, you're going to hear the exact same story that's being reported at Fox News. Well, like I said, if there were a less neoconish news entity left in America, they would be reporting that it's Washington's fault. So who really is at fault? Here's what we want to do. Let's strip away the politics and simply ask the question, what or whom actually led to Venezuela's disastrous oil economy? To help us answer that question, I want to do two things. First, I want to show you this chart. Let's put it up. You can see in the chart right there, the line representing the active drills in Venezuela over the past decade starts to decline around 2015. That's important. Keep that number in mind. 2015. Look how everything goes whoop, like almost off the chart, right? Joining us now is Venezuelan expert Miguel Tinker Salas. Is it fair to say, for people who watch news in America, that possibly both Maduro, for his somewhat incompetent actions in leading Venezuela, and B, the U.S. interference, have both played a part in the collapse?
I think it is safe to say that they both bear responsibility. But I think the larger question is what has collapsed in Venezuela is an economic model that depends on a single product for major export. That is, 95% of the country's revenue comes and is derived from the export of oil. So for me, what we have is a collapse of an economic model that long-term was not sustainable. Whether you were producing 3 million barrels of oil a day or now maybe producing as low as 740,000 barrels a day. That is the larger question we're talking about here, and that is that the failure of an economic model that has now been exacerbated by mistakes made in the government of Venezuela and also by the sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuela, which seek to make the economy scream. And that should be sort of a recollection of what was attempted in Chile, was attempted elsewhere. The sanctions have aggravated conditions in the country, have made it impossible to get credit and reinvest in the oil industry itself.
Here's what's so fascinating about what you just said. First, we have three entities here. A, the pre-Chavez, pre-Maduro entity in Venezuela, the people who were in charge back when, who essentially had a monolithic economy based on one thing, as you say, and only one thing. Chavez and Maduro take over. They don't really help it that much. In fact, they may have not worsened the situation because of the leadership decisions that they made. Then the third entity is the United States comes in and says, we want to get rid of these guys. How do we hasten that? Let's stick sanctions to try and hurt their economy even more. From what I'm hearing you say, all three of those things happen, and all three are part of the problem.
But the main part of the problem, again, is having a rentier economy. That is, an economy that lived off of oil rents, that long-term produced crisis after crisis, whether it was in the 50s, whether it was in the 70s, and as population continued to grow, and now we have 30-odd million people, with expecting the state to provide the social benefits, the subsidies, the economic support. That complicates situations, particularly as the price of oil decreased. During the Chavez era, what we had was a deepening of the notion of the rentier state, that the state could provide for the entire population, and in fact expand it to include those that had been marginalized by the pre-Chavez era governments. And that was the great accomplishment. You saw poverty go down, you saw housing programs, education programs, all being paid by the oil company, the Venezuelan National Oil Company. Long term, that wasn't sustainable, particularly as the price of oil began to decline in 2014, 2015, dropping down from $100 to $29 a barrel.
Let me put that chart up again. We're down to about 30, 40 seconds, but I want to get your take. Look at 2015. 2015 to 2019, this thing just drops like a lead balloon, right?
Drops
and
down.
That's also at the same time that the U.S. was really putting the squeeze on Venezuela. Is that the cause of that?
Well, that's part of that problem was, yes, the sanctions are important, and they began under Obama and continued under Trump, but also the government was not reinvesting in the oil industry, and they were moving from the lighter crude production in the Lake Maracaibo region, which was exhausted, to heavy crude production, which the cost of actual production is higher, and they were having to import, in some cases, oil from abroad to mix with heavy crude in order to be able to export it as light crude for sale in the U.S., in Russia, and in China, so that there are complications within the internal political structure of Venezuela that also aggravate it. But again, sanctions only make it worse.
Miguel Tinker Salas. You know, it's like a full-throated, wholesome conversation about what's really going on in Venezuela without just name-calling and accusation. I appreciate you helping us through this. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.